afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural, with our two legal experts, Ed Richardo Esquire and Royce Russell Esquire. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't believe we are this far into the month of March. Hope you're being safe. There's some sprinter weather happening on the East Coast, so wherever you are, we hope that you are warm and safe. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing the broadcast with those that you care about who might be able to glean some insight from our legal experts. But before we get into today's show, let's hear from both of them. Señor Machado, ¿cómo está?
Hello, everyone. How are you this afternoon? Thank you for coming and joining us. Hola, mi gente. Buena tarde. Bueno verlo aquí hoy esta tarde. Thank you for joining us. I believe you'll find our show quite fulfilling, educational, and inspirational.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Mr. Russell.
I always hope that we're inspirational, at least in the sense of being informative, because some of the information is hard getting and a lot to digest, as we will see today. But that's what we're here for, right? Life is not easy. Life is challenging. So let's get to the challenge. Let's step ahead and move ahead.
Absolutely. Well, when we are able to get information about those who transition, who have had something particularly to do with community and with the work that we do, we want to recognize them. And Dennis Cunningham, who is a civil rights lawyer for varied causes, died at 86, and he represented the Black Panthers. And that's just one of the many cases that he was on, but someone who was passionate and committed to litigating on behalf of civil rights. So we wanted to acknowledge his transition.
Yeah,
I definitely wanted to say, two words to him. I mean, in that, some of the things he did over his years is represent and fight for, as the article says, prisoners, inmates. That is a tall order to fight for somebody that's incarcerated, either wrongfully convicted or being abused or having their rights taken away from them, as small as due process to as large as negligence and assault and battery to wrongful conviction. It takes a lot of resources to retry a case, to find to find witnesses, to have a victim recant if their story was false, if they was pressured, dealing with inmates and the atrocities that happen to inmates in reference to their inability to true equality is a mountain to climb. And then being associated with the Black Panthers and the miseducation as to what the Black Panthers stood for is a crime in and of itself. And so he stood tall in that arena. I'm sure he didn't stand by himself. I stand with Ed. Ed stands with Dr. Grant. Dr. Grant stands with someone else, right? And so we know no battle is won by themselves, despite the media trying to pinhole that in our brown and Black society that there's only one quote unquote leader, only one person you go to when you have a problem or issue, not really appreciating and putting respect on the vast talents that we have within our community. So rest in power, brother.
And just to give the folks some insight, lawyer Dennis Cunningham sued the city of Chicago for the murder, assassination, killing of the legendary Fred Hampton, leader of the Chicago and Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers. Another young man named Mark Clark also died during that assassination when the police rushed into his apartment and shot him to death and almost killed his wife and Fred Hampton Jr., who was in his mother's stomach. And then he also sued, he was also involved with several other lawyers in the representation, I believe, of about 62 Attica inmates that were involved in the riot that occurred back in the day. So, he was associated with some very legendary causes and cases. So, much power to this ally of the community, of the Black community, if you will.
Absolutely. And, our condolences go out to his family And thank you, John, for tuning in and being a part of the show today. And some history, because maybe there were some who didn't know about his story, and highlighting those who've been on our side, been our allies and advocates for justice over the years. So we wanted to do our part in recognizing and sharing that information.
And, and,
And
and, and just to mention, I'm sorry, Royce was talking about something very important in terms of lawyers standing up for each other, allies standing up for each other. Actually, Dennis Cunningham, apparently he called another lawyer right after the murder of Fred Hampton, and that lawyer told him, hey, listen, why don't you retain a forensic expert to hurry up and go into that apartment and start gathering evidence? And that's what helped with the civil case against the city of Chicago later on, because they were trying to basically, hide the evidence. So,
and we'll see that is the theme when we talk about lynching later on, right? Hiding of evidence and not really properly investigating. But one of the things I want to say is that as we go through, unfortunately, our list or names that we want to say rest in power to those on the negative end, in that they're no longer with us. Um, the way history plays out, and I'm on this theme, there's always more than one person that is pulling the rope. It is a tug of war. You might see the first person and you might see the last person, but you don't see maybe one or two people in between. And why is that important? Because this brother was a person that was in between, right? You hear about Adam Clayton Powell, you hear about other folks, but he was in between, right? He was doing the work in between. And that just made me think about, Colin Kaepernick. You got him up front, but then you have Eric Reed, who supported him, who was also on the team and who also took a knee and who also was blackballed. And he was in between. And so when we look at whether it is a Johnny Cochran or a Benjamin Crump or Ed Pichardo, there's people in between that are rocking and rolling, that are pulling this same rope. The narrative and the media may not come their way, but we need to appreciate that in its totality, right? There are people that are in between what Reverend Al Sharpton may say and what Reverend Butts may say, and whether, in between Reverend Herbert Daughtry, what he may say. There are people in between. We need to embrace that. And I just wanted to make sure that we do while we have this moment right now.
absolutely. Point well said. And were you going to say something as well, Senor Pichardo?
oh no, I mean,
Okay.
I would mention recently I found out about A.D. King, Dr. King's brother, who people don't even talk about him and his involvement in the movement and supporting his brother, and how he passed away shortly after Dr. King's assassination. And we got to start really talk about the people who, the man next to the man, as they would say back in my day, and woman.
I was
There's
about to say,
other
hey,
people
about
in
the
between
ladies.
that get overshadowed, but are doing valuable work. So I'll leave it there.
Absolutely. Well, there's always more to the story. And as we shift to another story, which is on a lighter note, one that we can hopefully celebrate, that the Democratic Governor Janet Mills nominated District Court Judge Rick E. Lawrence to serve as Associate Justice on the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. And if he's confirmed, he would join the state's high court as its first African American justice. He's 66 and has served on the district court for over 22 or close to 22 years. So this is pretty major.
Oh, it's definitely major because I've litigated in Maine. You ain't trying to do that. You understand what I'm saying? And so let me explain to people. When I say litigate, that means try cases, criminal cases. That means negotiate cases, criminal investigations, and it's lonely in Maine for African American attorneys. Now, some people that's watching this show, what do you mean? Yeah, we're here, but you're not there in numbers because we're not in numbers down here in New York City. And I don't know Maine to be a destination for folks of color. And let me tell you, this is a big, big moment in time. No two ways about it.
Yeah. Much props to Judge Lawrence. I mean, I wish him well. This is a momentous occasion, definitely historic. For the edification of the audience, as you're probably aware, each one of these of the 50 states has its highest court. When people talk about the highest court, they usually think of the Supreme Court on the federal level. But each state's highest court is just as important. Because we're talking about a range of cases, from criminal cases to civil cases. It runs the gambit, and you definitely want one of us up there as a jurist evaluating those cases. So,
And here's an example to put it in place, right? We often talk about false arrest, police brutality case, wrongful death. You go to trial, you win the case. Jury comes back with a verdict, 14 million, 12 million, 75,000, whatever the number is. And what the city always holds out, the municipality, the person that has to pay, always holds out, oh, we need to settle this case, and you don't really want to go to trial because if you get a verdict, we will appeal it. We would appeal it. That makes his way to a higher court, to what Ed is saying. And every state names it something different, but that makes his way to the highest court within that state. And often in this litigation, in the world of wrongful death, forced arrest, police brutality, I always say that if you don't have black and brown folks, Latino folks, people of color at the highest court, then those that are just reading the transcript, that's exactly what they're doing. They're just reading the transcript. Their life experiences are not interwoven into the facts because their life experience has not been your experience, has not been the experience of what they see in the city, has not culturally been their experience. So now you have somebody that's reading a book, reading an article, not reading something that happened, a narrative that happened in someone's life. And so therefore the verdict that was once 14 million gets reduced to 75 to 7,500, $750,000 to $12,000, because we don't have folks on the highest courts representing, bringing their life experience, seeing what's going on, and be able to rectify it. That's how important his position is.
Absolutely. So we will be watching to see if he does get confirmed, because that is not only historic, but as you have just pointed out, very necessary for the cases that we have to deal with, and having someone to represent us. It's still baffling to me that in 2022, we're still talking about the first, the first of representation, the first. It's wow. I'll leave that there
Well, let me
because.
let me just add something from a professional standpoint. It is amazing that you could be on the phone with a potential client and they may be switching lawyers, or they had a consultation with a lawyer and it's a person of color, and you're practicing in criminal defense, or you're practicing in employment, or you're practicing in civil rights, forced arrest, police brutality, or other title violations with the federal government. Let's say Title VII, Title IX violations, and someone says, "Oh yeah, well, I consulted this attorney Ed Pichardo," and I, on the other end, immediately know who that person is. That's crazy. In New York City, that's crazy that I'm able to pinpoint that person. That tells you how the numbers are not as large as you think. When someone says, "Oh yeah, I consulted with Xavier Donaldson," you're like, "Yeah, I know that person. Yeah, yeah, he was a year behind me." That's incredible. That tells you that despite the fact that you see in the bouncing ball bounce very high and bounce very far, it hasn't.
Well, and that says a lot. And while we're talking about people and things happening, we don't have a lot of information on this particular situation. But with everything that's happening over in the Ukraine, with Russia, one, we want to definitely send our condolences to the families who have lost innocent lives, children and such, with the invasion. But we have a U.S. basketball player that seemingly is in a little bit of a challenge there. And before we get into where we're discussing what's happening in the world with a verdict that just came out and some of the lynching, I think it's worth mentioning while we're talking about it. This could be interesting as well, how to get this U.S. basketball star out of Russia.
And so Ed, this is my wicket basket right here. We talking immigration again, right? And so we talked about it last week, Dr. Grant. We talked about Ukraine. We talked about temporary protective status. We talked about the mistreatment of African Americans and Africans in reference to being allowed to travel and go to refugee camps and being allowed to leave the country of the Ukraine, and how darker folks always get the brunt of the stick, right? And so now we have this American basketball player, African American basketball player in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
when America is doing all these things to Russia, rightfully or wrongfully. You can have your side of the aisle. I am remiss and sorry that she didn't get the memo that she needed to leave a long, long time ago, right? Long time ago, or maybe not gone over there at all. Although she plays for the team over there and she plays for the WNBA, and she was trying to leave, right? Trying to leave. There's some balance in that. You have to be fully, it's just a cultural part. You have to be fully aware of what's going on around you, and reading every single tea leaf that you can, and then act accordingly. For every action, there's a reaction, and act accordingly. We don't know the beginning and the end of the story, but now she's being detained, and that is not because of the violation that she committed. We know that's more towards retribution and retaliation towards America.
Yeah, I think what's happening here, from what I understand, she had been, I think before this story came out, she had already been in custody for probably about maybe a week, and then the story eventually came out. Apparently, she was caught with some hashish oil in a cartridge that's used for vaping, and that in Russia is illegal, and I guess possession of it carries 10 years. And the unfortunate part of it is, I would imagine that under normal circumstances and times, this might get treated differently. But right now, the level of acrimony, obvious acrimony between the United States and Russia, is causing her to become a piñata in this evolving drama. Because now, the question is whether the Department of State is going to be able to get her out of there, and whether the Russians are going to be able to are willing to release her, and for what? I mean,
Look, when it comes down to black folks, Ed, you know
yeah,
that
exactly.
we can be forgotten. We can be forgotten real easy. This is not a Karen sitting out there, and folks that watch our show, I don't even need to define what that means. This is a sister that may be left behind. I hope that's not the case, right? We might be marching, trying to get Biden to put the pressure on, just like folks were marching for other Ukrainians to get temporary protected status to stay in the United States. This is a march waiting to happen. And it's unfortunate because what we try to provide to our community and those out there is the tea leaves. Read them. Read the tea leaves.
And this is one of the things, right? Because I believe recently the female soccer players were able to get salary parity. See, a lot of these sisters, after they finish their regular NBA seasons, WNBA seasons, in order for them, I guess, to continue to be able to earn, go and play in these foreign countries. They can't just rely on that WNBA income, right?
I mean, you're right. To a degree, they can't. The WNBA season is so shortened. That's the other part. The WNBA season is so shortened that what else are you going to do with the rest? I mean, like, it's not here for a long period of time, right? So you have all that time, and we know women are productive. They're moving. They ain't staying still.
And see, the other twist here too is this sister, I believe, is LGBTQ too, and I believe that my understanding is that the level of tolerance in that country on that level is low to non-existent. So that's what's also scaring people in terms of her health and welfare, and hoping she's gonna, survive throughout this ordeal, because this is, it's gonna be tough. I really wish the sister the best.
But once again, color comes into play, right? On the American side, right? What is going to be the amount of pressure? Who's going to start the conversation? Making sure that this is not a side story. Is the fellas on TNT, Chuck Smith and Shaq and Ernie D, are they mentioning this on a nightly basis, right? The folks that's on ESPN on Tuesday, Wade, Lefferwitz, Shaq, and I forgot the sister name who She's a fabulous all-star. I can't remember why I can't remember her name. Candace. Are they mentioning it, right? Because closed mouth doesn't get fed. So
And that's
folks
why
need to
Speaking
mention it.
Legally is talking about it right here.
Right. That's right.
Yep. Because a lot of folks might not know it's happening. And like you said, if it's not being talked about on major news outlets, folks just won't know. So we hope that.
And Dr. Grant, and to the point of allies, see, this is the thing, right? Yo, it's coming to me in Revolution, boom, where's drop the bomb? Because it's coming like boom, 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 I got it. Boom, right? When we look at someone like Brian Flores, right, who's in the lawsuit, right? We talked about that before, discrimination within the NFL, right? He's going to be looking for comrades to stand with him, other coaches, right? So far, the wind is whistling, and I haven't seen anybody, join arms, but not a multitude of people, but that's out there. It'll be interesting to see, will the WNBA players join arms to put pressure to say that you have to release this sister in any shape, form, or fashion, and have the NBA put pressure, right? Because she wasn't no just old regular body. She was getting busy in the WNBA. I mean, she was a force. She was a big force. She's with the Becky Hammonds and the Candaces. Lisa Leslie. Was a force. She was dunking, right? We on a regular in the NBA. She's a force, and so it is incumbent upon these organizations and these corporations to keep the pressure on, and that's all I ask for.
Well, we will be following the story. We broke it here for those who are listening and learning about it for the first time. And John and Richard, thank you for tuning in today. And we're going to get into another story that we've been following and talking about since the original trial. And now we are at the point where the news says Thursday, Brett Hankinson was acquitted of all three counts of a felony wanton endangerment in the botched raid that killed Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, this is unfortunate. This is really unfortunate. From my understanding, this gentleman just unloaded and shot repeated rounds with really no regard for who he might hit. And for some reason, I think there was some 20 odd, some odd witnesses, police experts testified regarding, proper behavior and procedure, but yet he was able to convince this jury that somehow they were under siege and that he needed to, outside, but so many shots in, and was able to get an acquittal. Two of the other officers, I believe, that were involved pled the fifth. They are still being investigated under a federal investigation that's taking place. So we'll see what happens there. But this is really unfortunate. This sister continues to get violated. It just doesn't stop.
I look at media whenever it comes down to these things, and you said it all, Ed. So I'm not even going to speak to that. But when I look at this picture, why they chose this picture? Are they sending the subliminal message?
With the brother there?
Yeah, without a question, brother. Without a question. Without a question. You know how many of his colleagues done grabbed him and talked to him during his trial. Now, when you want to announce that he's acquitted, unless folks read what the picture says, read the print underneath it, it gives you the impression that he has support from those of color. And in regards to this, and maybe he has support of his fellow officer who's standing there, the deputy who's standing with him. But when you look at that picture, you would think that the community is behind him and that there's some justification for the verdict. And so that's why we're showing this picture. What drives a lot in America and many places is the presentation of information.
Yeah, imagery is everything.
Without a question.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and on CNN nonetheless.
If I walk in the courtroom, it amazes me. Here's one quick story for the folks out there. And this is what I mean by imagery. The guy comes, he wants to retain me to represent him on the criminal matter. He comes in, he's wearing sweatpants, like he's going out for a run. I tell him when we go to court, None of that. You dressing up. This is important to you. We have to show the world is important. This is imagery. Speaking of what you're saying, what we see here, imagery. We go in that courtroom, we finish what we have to do for the day, and the judge, before he leaves, says, I appreciate that you dressed appropriately for court. So that means all the other guys that came in there that weren't dressed appropriately, he had an opinion about those people
Mm-hmm.
in his
That's all
brain, not articulated. So imagery is everything. And when you show this image here, shame on you. Come on now. You know, what are you trying to do here? You think folks from Speaking Legally ain't gonna catch it? You better stay up all night. We got it. You better stay up all night.
So this, let's just talk legally now. What worked in their favor for him to be acquitted with all of the evidence?
I mean, I think the defense basically concentrated on, the boyfriend shooting and them feeling like they were in danger and having the feeling it necessary to shoot back. I mean, I can't think of much else.
And then also I think they sat very firmly on foreseeability and reasonableness. Was it foreseeable that someone would be in the other apartment? Remember, the charge is not in reference to how they reacted to Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend. It's the fact that folks were in the other apartment, right? And he should have known better, than to fire his weapon, right? And so, as Jerry commented, and I was about to say, you look at the exigency of the situation, what was going on at the time, right? Shots are being fired. There's the reality is that the boyfriend fired shots. Police officers are firing shots, even though there is a little bit of a contradiction in that other officers did not fire where he did. So one can say they were scared or wasn't trained well, right? Some people will say that, like, what are you doing? We in fire. You're firing against your fellow officer. How you not fire? And some may say that this officer, Hankerson, jumped the gun, didn't follow protocol. But it's the height of what's going on that creates the ability for some folks to say, you know what, I'm gonna give him a pass. I don't understand it. I'm not saying that. I'm just
and
putting
apparently
it in.
he also claimed that he didn't know that there was that apartment behind her.
Right. But then that leads to the negligence of the city and the police department, is that you're going there, you're going to execute a warrant. You got to have a tactical plan, right? And so I guess if they, some people in the mind say, well, we paid $12 million to the estate of Taylor. What more do you want? No, we want everything. We won't leave no chips on the table.
Mm-hmm.
We want a conviction. We want accountability. And the way accountability was eluded in this case was that one officer retired, right? So he like, I'm out. That's it. Right. And the other two was fired. And I can almost bet you a bottom dollar this gentleman here, Haggerson, given that he was acquitted, I wouldn't be surprised the next thing we see is a case where he's trying to relitigate his termination. Does that seem surprising, Ed?
Not. I would imagine he may try.
I don't know him personally, but I'm saying those circumstances are not foreign.
Well, yeah, because he's gonna argue that the burden of proof at this criminal trial was higher beyond a reasonable doubt than it will be at any administrative hearing that he would be dealing with respect to his job. So,
and I was acquitted. So back pay, whatever. Let's go. If he calls your office, Ed, you know what to say, right? Because he may just call, since your expertise is in employment. If he calls your office, you know what to say.
Ed is like, I don't know if I'm taking that case. But we will. I mean, the other two, it just makes you think, the direction that they're going in if he got acquitted. So, right. It's spending taxpayer dollars again on another one. But you know what we say, Ed, hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
I think it's snowing outside right now, so y'all can keep
no spring right now.
Yes, indeed. Well, here's another part to the news, as we are updating on that and we've been following. And once again, it speaks back to jury selection about who was there, how this all played out, connect the dots on all of our shows as our legal experts give background and insight. Now we have one that has been long standing as trying to get it passed. I can't believe that we had to wait till 2022 to discuss the anti-lynching bill officially passing, and now it's waiting for a signature, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It passed the House. It finally passed the Senate, despite Rand Paul's objections, because that's the reason why apparently it didn't pass the last time it was up for a vote in the Senate, because he wanted some sort of amendment to it, and and I think Steny Hoyer, really, got on him about that in the media. But they were finally able to pass this anti-lynching bill, and this has been decades, years of fighting for this. I mean, I think I did some research, and the first anti-lynching bill was back in 1918 at the height of lynching in the South during the Great Migration to the North, where Black people were getting lynched in many states in the South, left and right, causing them to be terrorized and moving to the North, where they also experienced, in some cases, the same thing, but to a lesser degree. So, enough props for to Congressman Bobby Rush, who apparently has been carrying on this fight for like the last 30 years. And listen, just so the connections, the historic, for those who don't know, Bobby Rush is the only politician to give former President Obama his only political defeat. Remember, Obama ran for Bobby Rush's. They ran against each other for that congressional seat in Illinois and Chicago, and that's the only race that Obama actually lost. Bobby Rush has been fighting for this, and it's finally on the verge of getting signed into law. It's unbelievable. And for anyone who thinks that, oh, well, why are we talking about anti-lynching now? All you got to do is do some research, and you're going to see that lynching is still occurring. And even in modern times, it's just being disguised as suicide. You got Black men hanging from trees, and people saying, oh, no, he committed suicide, so.
And I guess, and that speaks to what you were saying before, when we look at one, who's running the investigation, people in power, people in places. Dr. Grant, you spoke about that, and we always speak about that. Two, we talked about having colleagues in common. Ed talked about, the brother civil rights attorney that just passed away, how he made a phone call to another attorney, and that attorney said you need to get a forensic expert at the crime scene, right, to get an understanding of what's going on. And so here, what we find is the same thing. You find that when lynchings occur and the investigation is done, because it's not deemed or viewed or categorized as a lynching, what happens is that they don't treat it as such. So the crime scene is tampered, is tainted, is, mishandled, because the police department and those investigating want to say that it's a suicide. I think some would want to believe that it's a suicide, not to have to relive the shameful past of America. And I don't mean shameful past like in past 1875. I mean like past 2017, 2015, 2012, 11, that past. And really have to deal with that lynching still occurs. And a matter of fact, they had to redefine the term lynching. Violence against one, a person because of their color. Redefine it that it encompasses violence, not necessarily hanging, because lynching happens in a variety of ways. We know the symbolic way, and we see it and how we recognize it, but it happens based upon the violence that is perpetrated and the rationale, the motivation for that perpetration of that violence, and is a hate crime. It amazes me how we see video on someone hitting someone that is Asian, and they're like, "Oh, that's a hate crime." Label it as such. No reason for that to happen. And then you have these lynchings, and there's no mental health history. They just been missing. Yeah, everybody has problems in their life, but it's not to that heightened awareness. And what I would say to the passing of it and the delay in passing of it, I wonder what those conversations were like. What was the concession that Congress personnel, people wanted to happen
Mhm.
within the bill that
Mhm.
made it take so long? What concession did did Bobby Rush have to make in getting the bill passed? That is really interesting to me, because on the face there should be no concession. It should be
Mhm.
labeled a hate crime as is, and there should be time associated with it. It should be conspiracy. It should be a bunch of crimes labeled around it, and there should be mandatory minimums. If there's a mandatory minimum when it comes down to a gun, and what I mean, ladies and gentlemen, as far as a mandatory minimum, there's certain crimes within the federal law that no matter what happens, you have to serve the minimum of the sentence. It's mandatory. That's why they call it the mandatory minimum. I give an example. What they call 924C is a gun charge. If you prosecuted federally for a gun, the mandatory minimum is 60 months. That's 5 years. I proffer, and I haven't read the bill in total, that if you're found guilty of lynching, if you're found guilty of violating the anti-lynching bill as a federal crime, a hate crime, there should be a mandatory minimum. Point blank. That's just my opinion.
Mhm. I think, the fact that we've taken so long to get here, it will be interesting to review and see what's actually included once the president signs off on it. But I'm thinking all the way back to Emmett Till and his family, his mom. There's the Mothers of the Movement was a series that aired recently on, I believe it was ABC or one of the networks, and it just brought back up a lot of emotions for elders who remember when this happened in real time. And the fact that we've had to wait so long for this is disappointing. But to your point, what were there any concessions? Did we get everything that we need to make sure that if you are found guilty, there's some real consequence to it? And Senor Pichardo, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on this as well.
I don't know if he can hear us.
I think he had a
Hello,
little.
hello.
Yes, yeah, you're
Yeah, we
loud and
can hear
clear.
you.
Can't hear.
We can hear you. So you have to love live TV because this is what happens. But we'll give him a second
At least
to
he's looking
read.
good. He's looking good. He's sitting there looking proper and everything. Right.
Yeah, he's just trying to redo. But as he was saying before, I pulled up this story because this hit the news back in 2020 about Robert Fuller, and that he was found hanging uh, from a tree.
That's correct. And I think,
And
was that in California or Mississippi? Where was that?
believe this one was in California, in
Right.
Los Angeles.
Right.
Mhm.
And then
So
the names go on. It's not only him. There's several other brothers that have been found in California, in various places that has taken place, and the municipalities in all of these places have considered it a suicide,
yes.
which is amazing.
Hmm.
How do you hang yourself from the tree? How is that a suicide?
To even get up there, like there's just so many logistical parts of it that don't make sense. But this is adding to the challenge that was presented and why this bill needs to be passed. And the delay in it was just insulting.
Yeah,
But Ed, I think we can hear you now.
I think Ed can't hear us, so I think that's the issue.
That's, that's the issue there. Well, we'll give him
My
a
sign
chance.
language, my sign language is not on par. So
We don't. We don't want you to do that. No, we have to have someone hired on the show to do that. But we'll keep trying to see if he can get in. But this president, I'm sure there will be a whole briefing and press conference around the signing of this that has gotten to this point, and we will continue to just hope that once again we start to pass and make changes in our laws that really protect and support the innocent, that there's equity across the board in how we do what we do, and let this system of law that we have really represent the concerns, the challenges, and the inequities of all of the citizens of this country. So, Senor Pajado, I think you're back and we
I'm
can
in.
hear you and see you. So, I know you wanted to say a few things about this before we continue on. When it comes to the fact that lynching is still happening, as Mr. Russell said, you know, labeling it as a suicide is insulting and it's ridiculous, and there are organizations that have been tracking the percentages of lynchings that have still happened since 1955.
And the hope is here that with this federal legislation being enacted, that it will give the federal government, the Justice Department, an incentive to investigate these incidents for the commission of a crime under this statute. And this is especially timely with also the increase of attacks against Black churches and the burning of Black churches. That's another issue that's not discussed very often. A lot of houses of worship, Black houses of worship, are being vandalized and burned. And that was always historically part and parcel with lynching, to quote unquote keep Black people in their place. And right now, with everything that's going on, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter protests, it's also exposed the amount of white supremacist nativist groups that have proliferated throughout the United States, and these militia groups, and which one can imagine are behind some of these incidents. So hopefully this gives a new tool in the box with respect to the investigative authorities and law enforcement to investigate these incidents.
I think it also reminds us and smokes out the responsibility of media in general, right? There is no hesitation for some of the national networks to repeat, oh yeah, a synagogue was vandalized, a swastika was written on here, somebody threw a rock over there. And I'm not minimizing it. Minimizing it. It should be reported, but the burning of these churches should be reported too. That should be at the forefront. That should be national news as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Indeed. So one additional question on this topic between this Emmett Till anti-lynching bill passing and talking about Black churches, what happens with the ability to go back and appeal other cases based on this becoming law?
Well, unless there's a section in the law that they're going to look at it retroactively, then it's done. It's only prospectively. They're never looking back. They're only looking forward. This is, your question is reminiscent when it comes down to folks being eligible to get compensation. Compensation is rarely retroactive. Is always prospective. And the same thing here. I know Biden is the Black people's president, but that bill got to pass both the House and Senate. And maybe that was one of the compromises, right? I said before, it would be interesting to speak to brother Rush and find out, what was the compromise, right? What was the holdup? What was the thing? What was the give back before everybody sort of like, because it surely wasn't the times. I can mention that, and I can bet you that right now. It surely wasn't just George Floyd and countless other Kowalski, Trawick, and you name it down the hill, down the list. It surely wasn't that. It was something else. What was the give back?
Yeah, I agree. It's very tough to get any legislation passed with a retroactive clause, and even then, it usually has a definitive number in terms of the amount of time or years or days or months that you can go back and apply the legislation. So
And this one would
I
be seconds. It'd be matters of seconds. We pass it. You got 2 seconds to retroact. That's it. Sorry, guys. Let's go to the next thing. There's no way it would even survive.
Yeah, yeah. I doubt that there's a retroactive clause in there, and I'm not saying that that would have been a bad thing, because
I think it would have been a great thing. It would have been great.
yeah, it would have been great. But
Mhm.
given the difficulty of passing this thing, I doubt it. That they're gonna that would be that was part of the legislation.
Absolutely. Well, maybe, I don't know, we can get a visit from our representative Bobby Rush. Maybe he can talk about his
I
experience on
deny it.
speaking legally. You never know.
Or maybe we
Yeah.
have to take the show on the road and head out to Illinois to Chicago, go to Wisconsin, somewhere over here where Ed went to school, and figure,
Hey, listen, I got friends out
you
there.
know what I mean? I know you got peeps. I know you got peeps everywhere. You know what I mean?
Indeed, indeed.
I think that would
Well,
it would be kind of interesting. And our studio has virtual capacity, so we can make anything happen. But we are grateful that he didn't give up the fight. You can get worn out, worn down, and give up. And he didn't give up. He kept this going to get us to this point, and that just speaks to the resilience of who we are as a people.
You know what? Hold on a second, guys. I just got a text from Michelle Obama. Ed, if you mention my husband losing again, we're gonna have a problem. That's the power of black women. That's the power of black women. I don't know how she got my number. She got Michelle. You mentioned my husband losing again, we're gonna have a problem. Somebody's about it, Ed. I think you better slow down, homeboy.
That's not a stat that we want to promote here on the show. But yes, we are.
Black on black crime. What you doing, Ed? You talking?
it's called democracy, baby.
Yeah.
Democracy. Well, talk about crime. And we have another issue that we're not going to necessarily get to go all the way in. Hey, Rolanda, she's laughing. Yeah, imagine he got a text from First Lady Obama.
No, that ain't the joke. The joke is that she talked about Ed, and the text coming in to me. That's reality. That can happen at any moment. You got the wrong end of the stick on that.
Oh,
Not getting off this show with you guys. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, like you wouldn't have been gone. We wouldn't know. We just see crickets and dust if that was the case.
We don't even use crickets anymore. We call cicadas. They make a loud noise, as I break out. That's how that goes.
Oh my goodness. Well, before we wrap up the show, we probably will continue a little bit more about this, but we're talking about crime and challenges. We have New York City in the news again. When are we not in the news? But this is New York City courts issue rules to ram through gun cases under political pressure. What is this about?
Well, apparently, I mean, I didn't.
Look how nice they make the guns look. Look how nice they make the guns look.
Oh yeah, very nice. They look kind of like gold or copper or something like that.
Like a gold thing, right?
Yeah, gold. I mean, listen, I didn't get to see the actual rules themselves, but I did go through the article. It's it basically talks about there being an acceleration in terms of getting the cases through quicker, quicker, getting it to trial quicker and so forth. As a defense attorney, it's a little disturbing because in many cases, when you get one of these cases, what you are trying to do is see if you can get an alternative to incarceration disposition for your client before even having to contemplate, going to actual trial. And some cases, the prosecutors on that end may not have all of their ducks in a row and want some time to, get their stuff together in terms of the case itself and to engage in a series of discussions. You also want to see if your client over a period of time doesn't have any new arrests, new offenses, and you can make the case that, hey, listen, this is not somebody that should be incarcerated, but instead should receive probation. But if you're like moving these cases really quickly and you're rushing them to either trial or a plea, you may not have the benefit of getting to look at all those things. Now, I know there may be cases where none of that is a question, but, I would say that, I would hope that these rules that are being put forth aren't being used in terms of a blanket to like cover every single case and every single case be treated the same, because everybody in the system is an individual, a different person with different circumstances, different backgrounds. And so, I hope that uniformity doesn't rule the day insofar as the treatment of these cases and rushing them through the court system. What have you say, my colleague Royce, on this matter?
What I was about to say is, if you live long enough, you'll see the ebb and flow of this being an issue. You will see, if you live long enough, buyback programs in reference to guns. It's happened before. It's happened several times before, and here we are again. At first, when I saw this article and read this article, my first reaction was, this is much to do about nothing. And it was my first reaction, but it's not my only reaction. Obviously, we want our community safe. We want gun violence at its lowest point. We want policing in our community, so therefore we don't have to die at the hands of guns. But what is this article really about? The title of this article could have been something different. Judges are not doing their job. Oh, snap. How about that as a title, right? The title could have been a little bit stronger. It could have been a little bit different. And so I look at what the title is and what the story is really saying. And what I see the story saying when I match it through the title is that Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, has an uphill battle. He's in the midst of a crisis. It has landed on his doorstep, and he has to do the best he can to try to resolve it. We know that he has in mind stop and frisk again in reference to minimize and mitigate violence, gun violence. And we know that has been misapplied. And we know from that there's been an uptick in false arrest, police brutality cases in the past, whether you call it stop and frisk or broken windows, you name it, it's been misapplied, and therefore we have these lawsuits. That's one area. The other area is like, all right, well, we're going to get those folks out there. And the other area is the courts. You courts, you're failing us. And you're failing us because you're taking too long to litigate these gun cases. Well, taking a long time to litigate a gun case, to me, doesn't necessarily correlate to more guns being on the street, unless you can make the correlation that the person that has the felony that's being charged with the gun has gone back out and repeated the act. If you can't make that correlation, then the fact that arrest exists, and if that person is not committing another violent act, or is in Rikers or somewhere else being detained, then the numbers don't really matter, except for if it's to hurt those who are arrested for guns, such as those that cannot participate in jail alternative program because the case is being pushed and defense counsel doesn't have the time or doesn't have the amount of time to properly investigate, or the DA's office doesn't have the amount of time to properly investigate. That's what it really hurts. And the article could be described differently. But the signal that it's also sending is as a defense counsel, I raise my hand because I'm one of them, is that once you have a gun case, you can't wait on the district attorney's office to do anything. You have to immediately get a mitigation specialist, one that can create a profile for who you are, or you yourself have to do it. I like to do it myself. You have to immediately investigate what jail alternative programs are out there, assess, the viability of your client being able to manage probation if he's so lucky to get that as a resolution. and you can't wait. And if this article is speaking about everybody raising their level of advocacy, everybody, that's the courts, that means the judges, that's defense counsel, that means me, the assistant district attorney in the district attorney's office, that means them. That's what this article is saying. We need to raise the level of advocacy so we can dispose of these cases in a very fair way to everybody. Because if you buy into that, most of these gun cases are are involving urbanites in poor communities, and if you buy into that, those poor communities look like black and brown communities. Who doesn't want resolution? Who doesn't want safety? Who doesn't want fairness? Who doesn't want equity? We want all of those things, and so that's what I said is much to do about nothing, because those are the things that we've been battling every year and every day of our life.
I mean, I agree. I mean, when I started practicing in 1995 is when I started
You
seeing
said
the advent.
1965? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I said 95.
Okay.
When I started seeing the advent of these courts and these special gun courts, and we only deal with guns in this court, and very rare in some very rare circumstances does that inure to the benefit of of the of the so-called defendant, right? The person being charged and defending against these charges, because usually it's used in a very punitive fashion with automatic dispositions that are supposed to match that offense no matter the circumstances. So that's what's always making me fearful of, whenever you have these courts that are supposed to either accelerate levels of rates of or the speed of prosecution, or specifically concentrating on one offense. So
I'll add to that, Ed. What also has me fearful and nervous about it is that we all know in any profession you become jaded. Any profession you become jaded. So if you deal with gun cases all day, every day, you're becoming jaded. Now, if you tell me that we're gonna have a rotation of judges in this gun part, that might rub me a little bit. But then again, now you have different personalities, so you don't have uniformity in what you expect when you go to that courtroom. So it's a tough Rubik's Cube. And then on top of that, you're not telling me that this judge or there's a system, the way to calculate and calibrate and to memorialize officers that come in where the guns are suppressed. That means the guns are thrown out. There was something illegal that was done. There was some false testimony. We need a record of that too.
Yeah, let's keep a record of that, right?
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? I don't
Well,
know, CD, a flash drive, MP4, whatever you want to call it. Let's keep it as well, because that is also creating this terrible dog chasing the tail type of scenario.
well, it's interesting how all of this plays out and how culturally, this affects our community. So seeing how this is being used as a PR strategy. If you read the article, you can talk about some of the other feedback that has come from reading that and getting, to your point, cases to move faster. It could have been titled a little differently if that's the outcome that we're looking for. So, to be continued, because this is not something that's going away. We haven't gotten to spring and summer yet. With the uptick on gun violence, all of the DAs are working around what to do, how to do. I mean, ultimately, we don't want to hear about any more lives lost to gun violence, but there's a long road ahead of getting a handle on how access to these weapons are handled on the street and how trials are litigated once it does happen. So it's going to be a while before we can get to what we hope would be the end of this plague of gun violence. But in the middle, we have to keep abreast of what's happening, and having both of you as legal experts explaining what we're seeing helps us to understand what the law really is, how we should be using voices of advocacy in the groups that are speaking about these things so that we can bring about the change that we seek. So with that being said, gentlemen, final words before we close out. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, time has come near for us to disappear. So I just want to wish everybody a healthy and happy weekend. Take care, be well. See us here same time, same bat station.
And I just want everybody to join me in celebrating Women's Month and recognizing women in history and the women in your lives. So time for celebration. And as to this show, farewell.
Yes, we of course started the month out with celebrating that.
No
so,
choice. No
yeah,
choice.
no choice with that. Not with me sitting here. But yes, thank you for the continuation of the Women's History Month and International Women's Day, which was yesterday, and just celebrating all of what we have done and continue to do for our world. So John said, peace out. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Rolanda. Appreciate all of you for being here, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.